Africa Uncovered welcomes you to this broadcast once again. My name is TJ. As usual, we discuss about the geopolitics of East Africa, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Burundi, South Sudan, Rwanda, all countries that make up East Africa, but also spread our wings to capture Africa at large. And some instances we go beyond and look at the entire globe. But today specifically, I was going through my X and I came about a publication, if I may, a tweet from one of the publications from Uganda called the Daily Monitor, and they asked a question which I thought was really, really important and intriguing that I should bring it to my audience and we discuss it, or I break it down in my own perspective. So they asked a question: what would Uganda look like today if President Yoweri Museveni had served 2 terms and left as initially provided for in the 1995 constitution? What would Uganda look like today if President Museveni had served just 2 terms and left as initially provided for in the 1995 constitution? That's what I think we should discuss today. It is what I want to discuss with you today. I'm going to be giving you my personal opinion, running through who President Museveni is from the early times of his politics up to where he is today, and what Uganda would have been, in my opinion, if he wasn't, or if he had left by 1995. Okay? So sit down, relax, fasten your seatbelts, and we have a long ride together. In 1972, Museveni participated in an abortive invasion of Uganda against the regime of Idi Amin. They were not successful. So the following year, in 1973, he fought alongside the Tanzanian army in the Uganda-Tanzania war to overthrow the government of Amin. That is in 1973. So there was 7 years of redundance, trying to put things together and organizing. And within that period, in 1980, he contested in an election that he lost. And he thought that the election was rigged. It was not free and fair by that time, which was won by Milton Obote. So what Museveni did was to unite with other young boys to go into the Bush War under the National Resistance Movement, and then they started the Uganda Bush War. So in 1986, after a decisive battle of Kampala, Museveni was able to be sworn in as the president of Uganda in 1986. So I want to put off that myth of people thinking that, by the way, Museveni took over from Amin. No, Museveni didn't take over from Amin. He took over from Milton Obote after that election where he thought it was rigged, and then he got his friends who were 27 in number with 20, they were a given number, but with 27 guns, and then they went and started a bush war, which eventually overthrew the government in power then, and then in 1986, he was able to become the president of Uganda. So all the time that he spent in the bush, during that time, fighting alongside Tanzania as well to overthrow the government, Museveni was mastering the art of fighting, especially in that tactic called the guerrilla war tactics. He became a master of it. So when he became president, he suppressed the Uganda insurgency and oversaw the involvement in the Rwanda Civil War and then the First Congo War. He ordered an intervention against the Lord's Resistance Army in the effort to halt the insurgency. So when he became president, after some time, then the battle to fight the Lord's Resistance Army that was terrorizing the entire northern part of Uganda started and indeed ended with, Joseph Kony running away from Uganda to South Sudan and then to Congo, where he's been chased, much as he has not been arrested yet and to be brought to book. At least he no longer fights in Uganda. He no longer actually causes insurgents anywhere, even in Congo and in South Sudan. You hardly hear that Konyi has been attacking people, at least the other rebel unions. So Museveni was able to do that with great strength because of the tactics and the urge and the love and freedom that he wanted at that time. Also, that is when before we actively got so much involved into this multi-party system and all that. So by that time, Uganda was under a single party system until a given period of time. So his rule has been described by scholars as a competitive and authoritarianism and illiberal democracy of some sort. So during his tenure, or in his tenure as the president of Uganda, Museveni has been seen as an anchor of peace, an exporter of peace among his foreign policies in the entire East Africa, having, ensured that, first of all, he was pivotal in the independence of South Sudan when they were seceding from North Sudan to form South Sudan. He was also pivotal in the DRC Congo wars that, have been trying to ensure that peace reigns in that region. So he's one of the exporters, or he is indeed an exporter of peace in East Africa. So having harnessed and created a very strong force of the Uganda People's Defense Forces, they have, after establishing peace within the borders of Uganda, Museveni and his team have exported an arm of peace to the region around and even beyond. Uganda's UPDF has been in Chad, Uganda's UPDF has been in Somalia, Uganda's UPDF has been in South Sudan, in DRC, in Central African Republic, and so many other countries within Africa. So that is undoubtedly an achievement of President Yoweri Museveni for exporting peace within Africa and sometimes beyond, out of the books. That is what is thought. So he has ensured that he creates a professional and a very formidable force in the UPDF, but also a professional wing or an elite wing of the UPDF called the SFC that is elite of the elite. So he has been able to really ensure that peace reigns in Africa. But even beyond that, we understand that President Museveni has been a champion of the unification of Africa. Every platform that he has had, whether in Uganda or in East Africa or beyond, has been fronting Africa first. Not even talking about his country, Uganda, first, but Africa first. Telling the whites that, look here, the independence of Africa should be total in its totality, not thinking that we got independence when in the actual sense we are still under neocolonialism. Okay, so he has been championing the independence of Africa in terms of the economies of Africa, but also unifying Africa to have to be like one country, but also have a common currency, open borders, and possibly freedom of movement from one area to another. And that is something that he was championing alongside Muammar Gaddafi. You remember, Gaddafi wanted Africa to have one currency, and among the people that highly supported him and wanted really to see Africa unified was Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. That is something that cannot be written of him for wanting Africa to be unified. And even when it came down to East Africa, he has been championing that. Unifying East African countries, okay, to have a common market, have a common currency, and possibly a common force that can confront any foreign powers that come to suppress them, has been one of the things that Museveni has always advocated for in Africa. But also, to go a little bit minute and talk about Uganda itself, he has been trying to ensure economic freedom for Africa. Everywhere he goes, of Uganda, everywhere he goes, he speaks of the 3 C's and 3 T's. I won't go much into the details, but he says by the time he came, Uganda was an enclave economy, and then it has been transforming every other time, and indeed education sector has been worked on, the economic development, the transformation in infrastructure, and all these things. Yes, he cannot be perfect in these all areas. Okay, we want better roads. Uganda wants better roads, and they're not there yet. Uganda wants economic independence. People want money in their pockets. They don't want to hear about the economy has grown by 6%. We are exporting this much when themselves don't have money in their pockets, which we call per capita income. So there is still that challenge. And indeed, as any other economy, any other president, any other person, you cannot be perfect at everything and put everything at equilibrium, but let what has been done be seen as an achievement. There is been a shift in education in Africa, but also so many other areas, including health, which indeed people keep saying, oh, our health is terrible. Yes, it is, but remember the number of people that used to die before Yoweri Kaguta Museveni became president. Before we had, health facilities spreading across the country, how much HIV was terrorizing Uganda to an extent that one of the first victims per se in East Africa, if not in Africa, was thought to come from Uganda. So he has fought HIV, and Uganda has been at the forefront of that. He has tried to ensure that the economy of this country is stable, at least at a reasonable, amount, or at a reasonable percent, but also trying to ensure that Uganda is secure both on an individual level, but also on its borders. So those are some of the things that this man has been able to do. Much as he has aged, definitely that is seen by even a child, but it doesn't remove the fact that, he has been able to do a number of things. Now we go back to our question at the beginning. Like I told you, the Daily Monitor wrote something intriguing that I thought I should share. And they said, what would Uganda look like today if President Museveni had served 2 terms and left as initially provided for in the 1995 Constitution? What would Uganda look like? That is very intriguing and a very tricky question. First of all, what did it look like when he had not come? And those are the things we were looking at. There was no economic development. Uganda was an enclave economy. There was instability in the region, but also in Uganda. There was very poor infrastructure. Education was at a very, very poor level. And, so many other things. So when he came into power, he improved these things, and he was a darling of Ugandans. When Museveni came to power, no doubt at least 99.809% of Ugandans loved him. But like in any other thing or setup, the more you stay, the more the love kind of diminishes, okay? People keep wanting to experience some other side or something else or another person, and that's understandable. Something that people sometimes advocate for even without knowing the repercussions. Yes, you can't tell the repercussions before you go there, but if you better a devil you know than the devil that you don't know. So I'm trying to give my opinion on this question that the Daily Monitor said. How would Uganda look like today if President Museveni had not had served 2 terms and left? First of all, President Museveni has tried to ensure that there is stability and peace in Uganda, and it has reigned since the 1995 that we're talking about, that has continuously happened despite losing popularity of some sort somehow, but at least peace has maintained, infrastructure has continued to grow, the economy has been stable for a given period of time since then, so there are so many positives that can be registered. However, in my opinion, this is what I would say. If Museveni had stopped at 1995 after serving the 2 terms and said bye-bye, there are 2 things. There is a number of things. One, he would be a hero and a darling for everyone in Uganda, East Africa, and Africa. That is no doubt. Why? It is within a time frame that people still love you, still want to see you, still want to listen to you. So definitely he would be a hero, considered a hero, a darling. You live at a time when people are still yearning for you. Yes, the developments he had brought about, stability had started to reign, economy had started to become better, freedom of speech had reigned, but had he left, that's what he would be known for being a hero that gotten Uganda from where it was to become a competitive and stable country. However, there are caveats to this, okay? We understand that, I've already said here that, look, Uganda is such a country that seems military in nature. Yes, before President Museveni, we've had presidents that have not been military men. But because people tested the insurgencies within the country before and a little bit after he had taken over power, they have gotten used to the situation of having military men as leaders. And it is something that is not going to change today, tomorrow, or even 5 years to come. If not anything, we might go like about 50 years without having a civilian president. Take it from me, as Uganda, because that is what we have been programmed to understand. We give more respect to military men than civilians. That is no doubt. We're not like other countries like Tanzania, like Kenya, that, you know, have had civilian presidents and people have respected them and people have heard from them. The background and the nature of Uganda is different. We are people that love exporting peace in terms of foreign policy, where our military men go and fight in other countries, one, to stop insurgencies from there, but also export peace. Now, if you're a country that doesn't have that at the front of its agenda and objectives, then you will find that your foreign policy is entirely in something different. Okay? So there will be no exportation of peace. Probably South Sudan would not have happened, because we all understand that he was 95% involved in ensuring that South Sudan gets its independence. So possibly we wouldn't have had South Sudan. We would still be having fights, regardless of what is happening now in South Sudan. But at least they are an independent country, they have a president of their own, and therefore had Museveni not come in 1995 and beyond, possibly there would be no South Sudan. That is very, very important. But also, Uganda, to me, would have been a very, very unstable country. There would be insurgencies cropping from one side of the country to another. And possibly the rebels like Joseph Kony would still be in Uganda, would still be terrorizing whichever area they want. Rebels like ADF would still be fighting within the boundaries of Uganda. Even when today is there are remnants of it. They come, hit a little bit and run. Had he not come back, it would have been a disaster for this country in terms of peace. There would literally be no peace in this country. Believe me, you. At least we should credit him for that, for ensuring that Uganda is stable and its neighbors are stable as well. Why do I say this? There is that undertone of greed amongst politicians in Uganda, of which civilians would want to be in power, but the military would not have allowed them, hence causing friction and insurgencies. We'd have seen a number of rebel unions, rebel groups cropping up in different regions of Uganda by now. Kony would still be in Uganda by now. The ADF would still be in existence, and so many other that would have cropped up. Do we take some time to think about it? Some of us do. So there would have been insurgents in Uganda. Uganda would not have stood on its moral grounds to say no to certain European objectives, certain European things that they want to enforce on Africa, things that they want to impart and make sure we go by whether we don't like them or not. Things like, being pro LGBTQ and plus and all those things of the sort. But he has stood ground and said no. In Uganda, for as long as I'm still president, we cannot legalize such. We will not give them room. They can exist, in hearsays, but not being popularized, not being brought at the front face. He has stood that ground, and not so many presidents can. Others want to say no, but they don't want to be put in bad books of Europe, so they are lying in limbo. But he stood his ground and signed an anti-bill into law in this country. We credit him for that, and we should credit him for that. He stood his grounds recently and said there is no more exportation of raw materials from this country. Enough is enough. You have stolen from us for so long. Enough is enough. How many presidents are able to say that? Not very many. Let's say the next president after 1995 is Dr. Kizabes because he was politically sound at that time. The likes of Paul Kawanga. Let's say Paul Kawanga was the president. I don't know. I'm trying to recall who were the politically viable people back then. Let's say power had landed in a non-military man. Imagine what Uganda could have been. Would they have stood against the whites, the Europeans, as much as President Museveni has done? I highly doubt. No more exportation of raw materials, period. It will not happen. We're not going to legalize morals that we Africans don't believe in, period. He signs it into a law. If you close this door as Europeans, we shall trade with China, Russia, and other countries. How many people would say that? People would be hiding. Whoever would have been president would probably be hiding in a shell. Oh, I don't want to look bad before the Europeans because I need aid from them. He stood his ground. If you don't give us aid, we shall look for other avenues. Of course, there are drawbacks, because I would say, had he not come back, probably we would have lesser corruption in the country. You know why? Because President Museveni has been very tolerant. People steal government funds and so, okay, now that you have invested in Uganda, okay, some kinda. So they steal and go scot-free. Maybe we would have had less of that. But I can assure you there would have been no freedom of speech in Uganda. We would be entirely different. First of all, there is insecurity. So when there is insecurity, you will not have freedom of speech. Period. Uganda would not have had as much freedom of speech that we enjoy today as ever. No, it wouldn't be. There would be fewer media houses standing independent. There would be no people speaking anywhere, abusing and insulting the person of the president, and you go scot-free. Now, I know people are going to be judgmental on this and say, oh, you're pro, you are an NRM man. Probably they gave you money to speak like that. No, I picked this from the Daily Monitor that asked a question. What would Uganda look like if President Museveni had served 2 terms and left as initially provided for in the 1995 constitution? I stand to say Uganda would have had no freedom of speech being enjoyed as we enjoy it today, whether you like it or not. Because I told you we would have had turbulences, would have had political instability, whether you want it or not. And where there is no political stability, there is no freedom of speech. Where there is no freedom of speech, there is no democracy. Where there is no democracy, there is no development. Where there is no development, there is no economy standing. You cannot export what you don't have. You cannot export peace that you don't have. So Uganda would have been an inferior country first in East Africa, but also in Africa. But President Museveni has been able to put Uganda on a world map. First of all, for being one of the oldest presidents reigning and still ruling, 35 plus years in power. That has brought talkability. But also exporting peace in Africa. Being a run-to person by all the presidents in East Africa would not be there. Everyone seeking, you remember the times of COVID when the entire Africa and even beyond would wait to hear what President Yoweri Museveni was going to do. No president, no one beyond 1995 would have done such a thing. They would have looked up to someone else. But here is a scenario where the entire East Africa, is looking at what President Yoweri Museveni is going to speak about COVID. If you think I'm lying, ask any other person in different countries, Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda, Mozambique, South Africa. People would want to hear what is Museveni saying. He encouraged us every day. He encouraged Ugandans, East Africans, and Africans that, look, we can make it out of this problem. Our bodies are strong. Our immune system is strong. We can survive it. And indeed, we survived it because of his wisdom, because of his ability to speak encouragement to people. He has his weaknesses. Everyone has their weaknesses. But write him for his improvements. Write him for his right doings. Speak about him for what positives he has done. You can speak of negatives as well, but sound the positives as well. Be balanced. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not a politician. I'm just someone who analyzes situations. To tell you that had he not continued, he would be a hero. Everyone speaking about him. He would be remembered as a hero, definitely. Uganda would be in turmoil, in political instability, with rebel unions all over. There would be no freedom of speech because we would be in a very undemocratic, not even an inch of democracy. Uganda would be an inferior country in East Africa and Africa. No one would be knowing us instead. And that is a plus to go to him. But when Daily Monitor put up such a publication, comments, the comments section has been raging. Minister Balaam said, Uganda's stability and progress can be attributed to President Museveni's visionary leadership, which has guided the country away from potential chaos. That is very true. That's what I was talking about. Without his leadership, Uganda might have succumbed to similar turmoil seen in countries like Somalia and Yemen Exactly my point. Another person called Brian Wekesa said, what was Uganda's political, economic, and security status before Museveni took over power in 1986? And you are suggesting that the progress made since then would have simply continued on autopilot without his leadership? That was a question from Wekesa. Then another Sebunya, an interesting one, was Uganda would have been in endless wars and coups. If you think that was just my wild thought alone, but there are other people thinking the same way, Uganda would have been in endless wars and coups, thanks to President Museveni, who managed to silence guns and restore peace in the country. The president has a lot to build, has also built a strong and disciplined Pan-African army. That is the UPDF. Someone says it would have looked, this is Rahuma Nakandi, it would have looked like hell. President Museveni has transformed Uganda into better country. And I'm not trying to be selective, by the way, in reading my comments. I'm just reading from up the comments on the Daily Monitor. You can visit it as well and see. Okay? What would Daily Monitor look like if it was fair and balanced for once? Okay, that was just like a by the way. The UGX 100 million wouldn't have happened in the first place. Let's start from there. There are people who are just tired, but that was, just on a light note. Imagine if he never happened at all in 1960s, playing the devil's advocate through the 70s and 80s, draining the national economy into 5 years, was spending. Just imagine that the border never opened in 1942 to let them in. Just imagine the Uganda we would have had. Pearl, as you said, the true pearl, that we would have had a true pearl. My friend, OBG, only born general. My friend, you have no idea. This Mzee has been able to shield Uganda from a lot. And indeed, like the above commenter says, that Uganda would have been in turmoil, in endless wars and coups, if it had not happened, if it had not continued beyond the 1995. And God forbid, someone talked about this, I think it was Munyagwa, on a given show, on a given radio. He said, pray that we see transition in Uganda when Museveni is still alive. But when he dies in power, by accident or something, and we wake up and hear that President Museveni is dead, you will know what he's been shielding us from. So pray for his peaceful transition, but just sudden death. Now that shows you how much he has held and shielded Uganda from. So don't joke with what he has been able to do. So that has been my personal opinion, what I think would have been Uganda without Museveni beyond 1995, from showing you what it was before, what has been able to reach, to do, but also the weaknesses within his government, like any other person. Like, for example, tolerating, corrupt people and a few drawbacks. But beyond that, my friend, we have had gold. We have gold in that Mzee. Believe me, I'm not a politician. I know you will roast me on this, but bro, it is a fact. So go down to our comment section. Tell us your opinion, what Uganda would have been without Museveni beyond 1995 as stipulated in the constitution of that time. What would Uganda have looked like? Believe me, you would have. Yes, we're not where we want to be, but Uganda would not be looking the way it is today. Believe me, it would be in a worse situation. It would be in a worse situation, because where there is insurgencies, instability, political instability, there can never be development. You would not have Kampala. You would not have Jinja. You would not have these other cities that we have. Yes, they are not what they are meant to be. We're not where we're meant to be. We would probably want to be Dubai or Kenya and beyond, but at least at least we're somewhere better with him. So comment, like, share, subscribe if you think what we have just discussed carries water. And please watch the video to the end. Make it a habit of watching to the end. Otherwise, from me to you, I am TJ and I say adios.